hotspots for steel production as well as consumption. So we take a close look at Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, three of the nations which are showing tremendous growth in their infrastructure, construction, and other industries. So we take a look at how these nations are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic and what plans they have for future growth. So let me introduce the panelists to you. Our panelist, the first panelist is Mr. Amir Ali Hussain. He is Managing Director at BSRM in Bangladesh, and he's joining us from Chittagong. So BSRM is a producer with a total capacity of 1.8 million tons, and its products are rebars, angles, channels, and ribbed wires. Its plant is in Chittagong. Our next panelist is Mr. Vaidyanathan RS. He is Director Commercial at Indica Group Limited in UAE, and he's currently joining us from Chennai, where he's locked down. So the Indica Group is a prominent trading outfit, and it sources most of its material from North America and east of Europe, and its markets are in Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia primarily. Our next panelist is Mr. Bharatendra Gupta. He is Associate Vice President at Jindal Stainless Limited in India, and he is joining us from Hisar. So Jindal Stainless produces mainly stainless products, and it has two outfits. One plant is in Jajpur in Odisha that has a 1.6 million ton capacity, and the second plant is in Hisar with a 0.725 million ton capacity. Its primary product is stainless coils. The next panelist is Mr. Fahad Javed. He is Director at Mughal Iron and Steel Industries Limited in Pakistan, and he's joining us from Lahore. So Mughal Steel has a 1 million ton plant, and it mainly produces steel bars and beams, and it caters to Pakistan's construction industry primarily, among others. The next speaker is Mr. Arshdeep Singh. He is Director of Vital Solutions Peak Limited in Singapore. And this company is also a trading outfit. It caters to Japan, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And it moves both raw materials and finished goods. And also there's Akshay Sharma. He's analyst at Steelmate Info Services, and he specializes in global ferrous scrap market. And Akshay is going to be the co-host along with me today. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'd also like to welcome our participants. There are hundreds of you out there. Thank you very much for registering. And I might like to tell you that if you have questions, you can participate towards the end of the panel discussions. So the proceedings, the way it goes today is first we have an initial round of question and answer between Akshay and myself, wherein we put questions to the panelists. That would take about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And after that, participants, it's going to be your turn. So do put in your questions in the Q&A box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. It would be wonderful if you can put in your name as well as your company name, so we get to know the context of your question. You might also like to wait until the end of the panel discussion so that your questions don't repeat what we have already covered. So let's get started. So the first round of questions really is for the three producers who are with us. So we have BSRM, and we have Jindal Stainless, and we have Mughal Iron and Steel. All three are producers. The primary raw material that you all use is scrap. You have induction furnaces. So I would like to know how badly you were hit by the coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent lockdown. And now that we are looking for a graded reopening of the markets and also production, how are things looking? So we'll start with you, Mr. Ali Hussain. Could you please tell us your experience?
See, in Bangladesh, everything closed from 26th of March. And from 1st of June, the government has opened everything. Even though the situation here from the perspective of COVID is not so good, similar to India and Pakistan. The cases are increasing, the deaths are increasing. But with all the shutdown, unlike especially India, where the lockdown was very strong, Bangladesh was officially on a holiday. So the industries were allowed to run if they could manage to bring their workers because the public transport was closed. So, but with everything closed, all the markets closed, a lot of projects closed, with people who cannot move around, it has been a very very bad situation here. The market has gone down. Any demand during April and May. Even now, we are struggling. So the struggle continues, and it will continue for some time. With all the logistics stopped, the logistics was very difficult to handle. We did manage to operate a little bit, but obviously not at the levels that we normally operate during these times.
What is the capacity utilization, Mr. Ali said, currently, and what is an outlook for it going forward?
See, generally, the utilization or the demand currently in the country has gone down to about 30 to 40% of what it should have been. So, and going forward, we will take small steps in raising, but I see that, to get back to the original levels, this whole year will go by and, we have to struggle because the problem is, with 2 months shutdown is people's buying capacity has gone down, and also the uncertainty, especially in what will happen in the next month, and every day is different. Suddenly, if the cases rise too much, we never know. The government might decide again for shutdown. So with all this uncertainty, nobody wants to start new projects. Nobody is willing to invest. Bangladesh is very highly dependent on the garment industry, with so many orders being cancelled from abroad. Even though the West and the developed markets are opening again, but still, even there the demand will be less for all these garments and all. So all the even new units investment in garments, new infrastructure projects, from the government perspective, obviously there will be some, cut down of investment. So seeing all that, I think it will take some time for the industry to recover. So this is a painful process, and there's no option but we have to go
Right. Moving on to Mr. Javed. Mr. Javed, are you also experiencing the similar situation as in Bangladesh? A capacity utilization down to 30-40% and really a 1 year outlook for things to come back to normal?
Yes, Ruchira. We have the same situation in Pakistan as Mr. Amir Ali Hussain. He just explained about Bangladesh. It's quite similar like India and Pakistan. The lockdown was imposed by the government in the end of March. And then from the end of March, it extended till the mid of May. So March end lockdown submerged with Ramadan and Eid. So these 3 months do not exist in our business calendar because it feels like we slept for 3 months. And when we woke up, it was June and we were about to enter new financial year of 21. So definitely we cannot take these 3 months into account for our sales because there are no sales activities in these months, and there is still a backlog which has to be completed, and the new orders which will come soon, they will be delayed further down until we don't know, like Mr. Amir explained, that we have no idea how much uncertainty is there and will be there in future if government impose another lockdown in future. Definitely, there is a lot of like a forecast that this might take us to some bad numbers in future, and the utilization has already gone to 30 to 40% down. So I think it might further linger on for a couple of months until things do not get certain and we do not get a clear picture from the economy and from the government. And if things as the cases are increasing day by day because the government has now lifted up the lockdowns. There is like a lot of new cases are arising every single day, and people are getting afraid of going to the businesses and for the new in the market. So there are many challenges, I would say, that have been already faced and we are still facing in the terms of plant running disruption, because the plants have been locked down since 2000, since March 23rd, and it has gone for 2 months. And then we have faced a material shortage, as what I experienced, that yards all over the world were closed as a result of the global pandemic, which resulted in material shortage. Not only the inventory with the steel manufacturer was either at sea or it was at its factory. Then the price movement was also one of the factors which could be seen, and that has prevented the yards to make further sale in the month of March and April. Then there was another problem which like we can see is the container shortages and there's a lot of shortage in the inventory and the port congestion and transportation as well. Like transportation domestically, internationally. And then we face a lot of problems at the port congestions, and it lingers on to the sales impact. So we have no idea how long it will linger on until we don't get a clear picture or further if there's any government activities or government policy for this virus.
Right. So moving on to Mr. Bharatendra Gupta. Mr. Gupta, are you seeing any difference in your situation compared to these two gentlemen in our neighboring countries? Or is it very similar that what you're seeing is very similar to that?
Yeah, mentioned, it's very similar in India also, and I think in India, steel mills will take some more time to come up to the level of 60 to 70% production, because here the lockdown was quite stringent and it was effective from March itself. And now government is taking all necessary steps to avoid further socializing and to have some different where the social contacts are not there, social distances are there, and this is the reason the steel mills are not yet coming up to the level where they should at least make up their margins. And moreover, it's like in India, it's around 120 million tons of steel is produced and around 3.5 million tons of stainless steel is produced. So all are equally affected because of this COVID. And if we think about when we can expect the situation to get normalized, it all depends how the market opens up. Okay, because few steel mills in India, they are able to export good tonnages to China, Taiwan in last 3 months, and they are able to get good orders. But the domestic consumption has definitely came down very drastically, because all infrastructure work is undershut. And if we talk about stainless steel, yes, it's a niche grade steel, and whose customers are also of high end. And the local demand, because wherever the stainless steel is required for white goods or infrastructure, everything is under standstill. Because of which, we are not able. We have two plants, one at Hisar and Jajpur, and unfortunately, we are hardly able to run at 30 to 35% production capacity. And the reason is we are also having very high inventories, because we are a net importer. Approximately 70 to 80% is import of steel, of nickel or MS thread, whatever. So we are having high inventories for covering for next 2 to 3 months. So these are the reasons where all these steel mills are struggling, with the captive and for the funds also. So I think it will take another 2 3 months. Somewhere around September, we should be able to come and stand up and say yes, something is there for the domestic consumption. Yes.
Right. So Akshay, the next set of questions are yours on the how the trading business has been. Akshay,
So now we'll move on to the scrap trade dynamics. How were the scrap trades to South Asia affected during this period? So we'd like to know from Mr. Arshdeep Singh, how was, as a supplier, how did you witness the demand from the South Asian markets, namely India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, for imported scrap getting impacted during this period since March 2020? And also the previous bookings prior to the lockdown, their shipments, how were they also impacted? Thank you, sir.
Right. Yeah, we actually, March was a very strong month overall. I mean, February leading into March, demand was strong. The freights for containers actually had gone through the roof because of the COVID-19 issue in China, and not enough empty containers being repositioned in Europe and US. So you saw freights go through the roof. On top of that, there was significant demand in the Indian subcontinent at the time, and March, therefore, was a very strong month from the point of view of order bookings. But as we got into April, we saw the entire demand come off, actually. And going into April, from March, if let's say you had the March production at a certain level, the April demand, March sort of requirements or March orders at a certain level, then April's demand just went out completely. You had new orders being placed, or the demand being to the extent of about 10% of the overall sort of demand in March. And so you really had the bottom sort of come off, and markets collapse and demand collapse in April. In May, you saw a little bit of a increase in requirements and demands in orders. I mean, I think from 10% to 20 to 25%, if you allow me to put that kind of a number there. May, so you saw a little bit of demand come back, and in June we see, even though it's the start of the month, but we see we see the trend to be more positive than May. But yeah, that's how it kind of trended. If you talk about March, very strong month. April, just complete collapse, and May sort of struggling back from the April levels. And yes, the orders, the shipments which got into some of these markets, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, some of these buyers, especially in India, we've seen a lot of ferment, a lot of issues on shipments which have come into India. In Pakistan, Bangladesh also we've seen certain issues, but the extent of the problem on shipments which went to India is extensive actually. Still in the process of being sorted out, and demurrage detention, people just kind of shut down completely. There were a lot of orders which were done on not on LC basis but on CAD basis. So there were these shipments which got stuck at there were lockdowns out there, and buyers not able to take or not wanting to take the material, and demurrage detention building up. And so the suppliers and the buyers, both of them, I think, and especially the suppliers, they've had to go through quite a bit of a churn on this on these shipments which were shipped in March and early April, and came into the markets in April and May. So it's been very, very traumatic for both supplier and buyer.
All right, sir. So now with the restrictions on transportation getting over, we see that things are getting eased a bit regarding to buyers collecting their shipments, consignments from the ports. And we'll also like to know from Mr. Vaidyanathan. Sir, we have been hearing about the low scrap collection rate and the low scrap inflow to the yards in USA and Europe particularly, and leading to a situation of less availability of scrap as a whole, at a global level. So now that for quite some time the demand is also low, how do you see the issue of the supply tightness in the coming months?
First of all, thanks for having me. And I mean, as regards, as Arshdeep was saying, like initially the demand in India was very good. Somewhere in January, February, you saw a lot of bookings happened in India. And subsequently, we had the issue of the containers, as the COVID cases were slightly getting worse, then we had an issue of containers getting stuck at various ports and all that. And those have been slowly now resolved. And the only reason why I feel the current market is firm and stable in terms of pricing is purely because of the entire cycle of business is broken now, and the collection yards in the USA and Europe and everywhere. In fact, this is applicable everywhere because COVID was common for everybody. That being the case, the collection has become a nightmare for everybody because the entire logistics got broken up completely. If you take India, for example, of course, India's scenario is different because we had this red zone, green zone, and orange zone, and all that. So that the geographical, like if you take in US, for example, initially it started very bad in New York, and New York was completely locked down. So no scrap movement was there in New York initially, and later on, it got shifted to other states as well, and most of these states in the US got infected. So now it's there in everywhere in US as well as in Europe. The flow of scrap is pretty low purely because of the two reasons. One, the shipping and logistics issue, basically the logistics issue, the local transportation issue, and secondly is also because of the non-availability of the people at places like wherever the collection could happen and the process could happen, nobody could reach. The shipbuilding, ship recycling, you talk about fabrication or any kind of manufacturing and downstream activities, fabrication, everything went on for a grinding halt. So these are all the main places where the scrap generates and where the collection happens. So the entire cycle was completely broken. So I see, like, unless this COVID cases, like, it's still increasing, and we have almost a huge number of cases in every country, and I don't see stability coming up in terms of collection of scrap in the near future. As Mr. Gupta says, I mean, as Amir Ali sir says, at least up to September, October, I don't see these coming up. The collection of scrap will be a difficult task for everybody.
Mr. Arshdeep, regarding the global ferrous scrap availability currently, can you put some light on the situation in USA, like the recycling yards at USA, what are they going through, and with regards to the scrap availability and collection?
No, I agree with Mr. Vaidyanathan in his assessment of the tightness of scrap carrying on in the short term, maybe the medium term. But what's going on in the US, particularly if I talk about the US, is that as said by Mr. Vaidyanathan, the entire supply chain got broken. You had peddler traffic just go to zero, and peddler traffic, the peddler scrap which goes into the shredders goes to for the HMS PNS, the cut grades is also, especially these two sort of grades. And forms about 25% of the input raw material for the processed scrap. That just went to zero because people couldn't go out and try to go out and collect material, and demand had also fallen significantly. So the peddler traffic just went to virtually zero. And then the demolition construction projects, those projects stopped as well. Then you had the car manufacturing plants shut down as well. So, bushlings from there, then from the demolition projects, PNS and the peddler traffic, which feeds into all these sort of supply chain for scrap, it just collapsed, and you saw a significant cut down in the availability or accessibility of scrap, so to say. What we see now is things starting to get back a little bit. You saw the last month, in the month of late April and May, the prices go up significantly in the US from the levels that they had fallen post the end March, early April kind of numbers. So you see things start to get back get back to a little bit of a normal rhythm, so to say. Compared to earlier, there are the peddler scrap is starting to improve. There are cars and automobiles which are being given for shredding, which had stopped earlier. The car manufacturing plants are starting up as well. So you see some of that come back on. However, having said that, so there's a supply increase, or access to scrap is better compared to what it was a month back or earlier. But however, you have to keep in mind that the demand scenario situation for the steel mills, both on the flat product side as also on the long product side, is still a big question mark. Just to give you a sense of this, I mean, in February, March, the capacity utilization of the US mills for hot rolled coils was some 70 to 73%. And today it's down to 53.7%, if I were to give that accurate number. And though we see some sort of price increases from these steel mills in the last 20 days or so, subsequent price increases, because they were coming from a really low sort of level. And there's some demand perking up, but the question is going forward, how does this play out? And that's really a big question mark. I mean, US, are we going to see a second wave? Are we going to see of infections? Are we going to see business resume despite the usual way, start sort of increased capacity utilization, increased demand? One cannot say, but currently, if you were to ask me, if you look at how the June domestic scrap prices have come out, they came out just yesterday. You see the shred prices go down $10 from the May levels. You see busheling prices go up $10, and you see the HMS and PNS prices remain at the rolling over, remain at similar levels to what they were in May, which goes to show that there's a bit of a balance, I would say, between the supply increase and the demand, which is kind of perked up as well. So that's where it is at currently. But going forward, the expectation is that the demand may not increase so much, and the expectation for July is that prices could be either rolling over or they could go down $10. That's the general perception right now, because we are in the scrap generation availability access increases from now on, June, July, to some extent, of course, relatively speaking. Overall, of course, with the industrial production being significantly down, the absolute numbers are down for scrap generation as well. But relatively speaking, from the previous month, this increases. These are the months when it increases, and you may find the supply outstripping demand maybe a little bit. But I would say would veer more towards the side of sort of balance between the supply and demand going forward. That's all I can tell you. I mean, we, as far as domestic demand is concerned, you have Turkey, of course, coming out and buying, and you have other markets hopefully starting to come back, especially Southeast Asia being stronger than South Asia. So that may bring some more balance to the overall sort of demand situation vis-a-vis supply. But having said that, keep in mind that the steel mills in the US, steel mills everywhere, in Turkey, they are operating at very narrow margins. I mean, the US mills today, they are used to some $130, $140 margin. So they are still in the positive, but they are operating at like $50 margin overall as a ballpark, the hot rolled coils mill, compared to the 150 that they normally operate on. At the same time, the Turks, if they sell at 410, 415 in domestic markets for their rebars, today buying scrap at $260, I think just they make a little bit of money, not so much. So you have to keep that in mind as well to sort of determine or have some idea on where the scrap pricing could go.
All right, sir. So as you mentioned that now in the coming months, the increase in demand and the increase in scrap generation are going to balance out each other more or less. So now let's get some perspective from the scrap buyers. So I will like to know from Mr. Fahad Javed about Pakistan. Pakistan is predominantly a container buyer. It imports scrap in containers generally, and for the last couple of years that has been the case. But this year, since February, we have seen quite a few bulk cargo bookings in Pakistan. And in February and March, there were 3 bulk cargoes booked, and then again another bulk cargo earlier this week was reported. So how do you see this trend? Is it just because of this particular situation that the container shortage was there, or will the bulk cargo imports to Pakistan will sustain for a longer period of time? What do you feel, sir?
Actually, basically, Pakistan import have been 100% based on containerized shipments, which are routed from around the world, mainly USA, Europe, and UAE. So shipping lines were unable to provide the booking, as Mr. Harshdeep really explained how what the situation happened and how the containers were stuck and repositioned because of China. So the containers were stuck on Chinese ports, leading to global shortage of containers. And any bookings which were done, they were at abnormally high rates. So it was hard for suppliers to even honor their shipments as per the agreed latest state of shipments only because of the freights availability or for the containers availability. So this has led the container shortage and which has led the customers to move towards bulk cargoes in Pakistan. And it was the only option left to procure the inventory at low freight cost. Then the first cargo of the financial year was booked in February by Mobile Steel from USA West Coast. And simultaneously, another parties also made a combined purchase of a bulk cargo in the same month. So yards are still not fully operational, and there are less incoming of feeds in the yards. So yards are still not available to offer the full material in high volumes. So Mobile Steel has booked another cargo, which you might have heard on the 2nd of June. And this might be the case for the same for the other steel mills as well, if they find the shortage, which possibly will linger on, I think, for another 1 month or 1.5. So to get the inventory in pipeline, I think there will be still a purchase of more cargoes coming up from other buyers as well.
All right. Thank you, sir. So moving on to Mr. Amir Ali Hussain regarding Bangladesh. Bangladesh imports quite a lot of proportion of their scrap via bulk route. And in March 2020, we saw record high bulk scrap imports. More than 350,000 metric ton of ferrous scrap was booked in the month of March via bulk from countries like USA mostly, then also Japan and Australia. So how do you feel about the demand of bulk scrap in the coming months to Bangladesh?
See, in terms of Bangladesh, since January, January, February, March, including April, on an average, if you average it, Bangladesh has imported about 300,000 tons every month. And March, April, the scrap came more because the prices were suitable, especially more so in April, and the cargoes will come in May, which when the prices had crashed, so the companies went a bit long and bought some extra cargoes. But going forward, the buying will not be at the at the normal levels, because when everybody has inventory, then we will only buy what we need from now onwards. And because we can't predict what is going to happen with the market in the future, so we have to be careful. The whole industry will be careful with the inventories. So in terms of bulk as well as containers, the quantities are going to go down, because generally what the country needed was imported in March and April a lot. And with the operations at a much lower level, so the requirement will not be the same. But in terms of going forward, how not only us but generally what the industry is feeling here is, we will take small steps up, and as we keep on selling, the industry will keep buying. Obviously, it will not be the same thing for the suppliers who are here. I know Indica and Vital Solutions, they do a lot of cargoes to Bangladesh. So it will not be the same. So and we also understand on the generation side is also low. But what I would say, what Ashdeep said earlier, the prices should correct a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's the final customers which dictate the markets all over the world, where if the prices go up, the companies try to push higher prices. But when the demand is less, it is not possible to push in like how you push in normal times, cost-based pricing that the industry does normally, and push it up. So when the margins are very tight, eventually what will happen is the companies are going to after buying something, then they will stop for a while, and that will put pressure on the suppliers, and the prices will need to go down. So, so this trend is going to continue until eventually the market balances out. So obviously, from the supply side, at the end of the day, everyone is in a business. So even the scrap processors, the collectors, they are also doing a business, and they haven't done much business last 2 3 months. So they will be also very eager to start collecting and processing and finding buyers to sell. So obviously the supply side will lead the industry, and there will be some time, there will be some excess supply, and the demand will slowly pick up. So demand will be chasing the supply and not the other way around.
All right, sir. Now we'll like to know from Mr. Bhartendu, as Indian steel mills will be looking for fresh bookings in a few weeks now, and the demand will gradually be picking up. So at the same time, last month it was announced that UAE has temporarily suspended their scrap exports, and UAE HMS was a very important origin for India as well as Pakistan for containerized scrap imports. So how do you see the impact of this decision on the wood demand?
Okay, Mr. Akshay. See, now there are two questions regarding the Indian scenario presently. We have to understand that the Indian demand is not going to come up before August or September, because for the fresh, buying. Yeah, definitely for fresh bookings, yes, Indian customers, they have to be in the market in the last week of June or beginning of July, because the cycle time is approximately 60 to 70 days. So this will start, but all will go very cautiously, because most of the steel mills, they are having huge inventory. And I think you must be knowing that approximately around 20,000 tons of ferrous scrap was in the ports. So those scrap has now started slowly moving to the respective mills, and the inventories will be sufficient to meet for June and July. And for August also, people are keeping fingers crossed whether the demand will be there or not. So for yes, September, bookings are surely going to come up in the last week of June or beginning of July. Now, the concern is how much quantities will be available at the respective yards, because the vessel availability, container availability is also a big concern. The ocean freights have increased. So all these factors are going to impact the supplies in, say, around August, September, and October. 3 months will be very crucial for us. So hopefully, since the demand will not be much, so some quantities can get administered, covered from the domestic market. Domestic market is also gearing up, and a lot of ferrous scrap is getting generated in the steel in the local market, which most of the steel mills are getting. So these are the factors for steel mills where ferrous scrap or busheling or PNS customers are dependent upon. Now coming to the point where the UAE has put the embargo ban on moving HMS scrap, which was around 1.2 million tons in 1920, and the ban is for approximately 3 to 4 months. I don't think it is going to have an impact on the Indian industry, because these 3-4 months are from May, June, July, and August, and these 4 months are not. They may not be requiring good quantities for their production. And whatever requirement is there, it can be met from the local scrap available, as plant and machinery, and to the extent the DRI. Because DRI is not getting exported at present, so it is in surplus. So all steel mills can meet their requirements. They are all comfortable till August or September. I don't think they will have any problem. The only concern which Indian steel mills will face will be availability of vessels, because it will be definitely a big challenge. The ocean freights are definitely bound to increase, and the second point is the feed available for shredding at the respective yards in Europe, because in US we understand that things can move faster, but in Europe it will take some time. So there will be the demand and supply gap and this is the reason the prices are firming up and are continuously firming up, and we expect that it will remain, say, until June and July, and we are expecting the prices should remain good. But only thing is, how much business is there at the prevailing prices? Because when the production is not there till say August, July and August, so I don't think there will be much business at the prevailing prices. Yes.
All right, sir. Mr. Vaidyanathan, if we can have your opinion also on the UAE temporarily suspending scrap exports for 4 months and the impact that it will have on Pakistani and Indian market.
Yeah, my view is like the temporary ban which was imposed on about mid of May will definitely have some impact in India and Pakistan. Why? Because one is the voyage time between Dubai and these two countries are quite short of. So it is like sort of just-in-time inventory for most of the steel mills. So people with limited working capital availability would definitely aspire. They'll be extremely comfortable working with UAE. And look at what Pakistan imports about approximately about 5 million tons a year, and India is about 5-6 million tons a year. Out of that, statistically, about 20% of the scrap used to come from UAE. So that is the kind of numbers we are talking about, which is quite substantial. Next being UK, being one of the second largest market to supply to these two markets. So UAE going out of the cards is definitely a slight setback, especially as I told you, to the people who have a limited working capital, just-in-time inventory people. So that's one thing. Second thing is I foresee this ban should not continue. It's only for 4 months period, and it's only temporary, and it's just to ensure that the local steel mills in UAE have complained saying that they have a shortage of raw material. Same problem as much as we are talking about globally on the collection of scrap is also applicable in UAE. So that is the only reason, and I presume that it opens out after 4 months, and so India and Pakistan can have the UAE scrap.
All right, sir. So my next question is to Mr. Fahad Javed. Sir, it has been heard that Pakistan Steel Melters Association has put up a request to Honorable Prime Minister regarding maintaining a tariff on steel prices. So can you put some light on the same? You are muted, sir.
Pakistan Steel Association actually has requested the Prime Minister to lower down or to waive off the duty and taxes for the time being, to surpass the Corona time. And we also requested for the waiver of damages and detention to the Prime Minister. But still, our request has been sent since 2 months, and no action has been taken yet.
Okay, all right, sir. So now we'll be moving on to the price trends and outlook, and Ms. Ruchira will take it forward.
Right. So we have been closely looking at Turkey, and what we see is that their import bookings rebounded in May and almost doubled compared to the month of March, and especially after the Eid holidays. So is this a sign that demand is going to get robust now? And what kind of prices are we forecasting for scrap in this FY? So starting from you, Mr. Vaidyanathan.
Turkey, the one reason that they have gone for such a huge bulk booking to the extent of about 450,000 tons in the last few days has been purely because I feel the number of COVID cases in Turkey is relatively low. And second reason, what I could think of is the currency is definitely getting stronger, Turkish currency. Thirdly, I feel that the government spending in Turkey is relatively very high compared to some of the nations, I would say. Like for example, if you take India, we are talking about 20 lakh crores being pumped in. Out of that, only 2,000 billion rupees. I mean, I'm talking in rupee terms, is for infra spends, and that is something like 1.1% of the GDP, which is not a substantial figure when you compare it with other economies in terms of spending. So Turkey has really come out well in government spending. That has really accelerated things there. And also the banks in Turkey have started offering auto loans and other consumer durable loans and all that to the people at a very, very economical interest rates. All this has attracted, and I could see that there is a lot of economic activity coming back into. As much as it is taking time in India or in any other country, Turkey is moving very fast. Is what I could feel. So that is one reason that why they went for such a, because they saw things coming up, rolling up, and they see steel demand. And to one more thing, that what I saw in Turkey is the kind of exports that they are into. Like China has been one of the even a day before they sold a huge quantity of HR coils to China. So these are all some factors which I feel is pushing Turkey to be. I mean, that's the reason why they are able to buy so much of scrap, is what I feel, and they are well covered up to July end in terms of scrap, and probably they will. My sort of prediction is they may not buy henceforth, and they may go silent in the next week. Is my presumption, and that could slightly, take off the pressure on prices, is what I feel, because Turkey has bought enough, is my view. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Singh, do you also have the same reading of Turkey's wolfish buying in the last month?
Yes, please. I would echo what Mr. Vaidyanathan is saying. Government spending and the government push their stimulus measures, especially in these times. And you haven't seen, you had lockdowns in various countries, but in Turkey they've kept it virtually open right from the beginning. They've not really closed down the economy. The mills have been running, continuing to run, even though at lower percentage production levels, but low production levels, but they've been running the mills, and the economy has not been sort of shut down by the government. They let it roll out, let it continue. They didn't sort of impose any lockdowns. So that's the reason I would say you see some sort of demand which has been there from Turkey. Then you talk about pre-Ramadan, post-Ramadan as well. Post-Ramadan, you have demand which comes in naturally, seasonally, which is aiding this renewed buying of scrap from Turkey. Keep in mind that the exports, whatever exports happened to China and so on, sustain them for a while, but the larger part of the demand is coming from the domestic market. And remains to be seen how this pans out as we go forward. Turkey looks a little more hopeful compared to the others. They've had enormous number of cases, but you see stability in the increase. I mean, there's no big increases taking place in either the deaths or the new cases. It seems to have reached some sort of if I may, stability levels compared to a lot of other markets. So things look a little more, promising with respect to the economy here, with respect to demand here. But I mean, this is all stimulus. They are very sort of the government has pulled out all stops and initiated a lot of stimulus measures as well. I don't know for how long this can carry on. I mean, will this sort of sustain itself right throughout the year by itself without export markets not really starting to function, which is what I feel is likely to be. It remains to be seen. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a continued increase in pricing if I were to say as we go forward. I think you'd probably achieve some sort of stability in the context of the scrap prices as we go along. It's a somewhat better market than the other markets that we've seen for reasons that I said. Hopefully, it'll be steadier than the other markets as we go forward.
So could you hazard a guess on the prices, on the direction it will take, and could you give us a forecast for FY21? So we have a price recorded here from Steelman data is $255 CFR Turkey for HMS 1 and 2. So what do you foresee against this for FY21?
So let me start with what the sense is currently with respect to price in the immediate term. There is at this point in time buyers wanting to cover some more quantities. They've covered for June and they still need to cover for July is what we gather. And at the same time, the suppliers from the US especially are being, I mean, from suppliers US, EU, all of them, they're being, they've not really, they sense that urgency from Turkey in the withholding cargoes and not offering too much while the Turkish buyers are out in the market to buy. So you may see a little bit of an increase. I mean, some people are portending $270 from the current 260. 260, I would say, is the price for the US cargoes. So people are, I mean, the expectation is that this could potentially improve to by another $10. But there are
$270 is what you're forecasting for FY21 for this particular grade.
No, this is the immediate term. But 20 depends upon if the vaccine comes in, and you have. I mean, it's a big gray area, I would say.
Right, and Mr. Vaidyanathan, could you also hazard a guess? So let's say on the shredded scrap prices in South Asia, we have the price level of $285 to $290 CFR, Mumbai, Karachi. So, any guess on what direction this will take, this FY?
I would say this is the most controversial question. I mean, when you say forecast, prediction and all that, it looks like, we are still looking for the astrologer who predicted that 2020 will be a booming year for everybody. We still look around for people like that, So prediction, very difficult to say so. But the logic that I have is Turkey has bought enough. So Turkey might go silent probably in the next a week or 10 days. So that will slowly ease down the pressure on scrap, number one. Number two, the collection is still an issue because I'm still not convinced that the COVID cases are increasing. Look at India, what is happening in India. Look at anywhere, in any country for that matter, leaving Turkey or China. These two countries are extraordinarily, they have controlled. But other all supplying countries, whether it's Europe or whether it is US, the cases haven't gone down. So I still feel the logistics issue is going to be there. The collection becomes difficult. So that's the only otherwise I see prices probably softening down in the next 10-15.
It could be softening down in the next 10 to 15 days. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Vaidyanathan? From $285 to $290 a ton, CFR Mumbai, Karachi.
Fahad Saab, the Mughal Steel has bought at 282.50 or 283, whatever, and the containerized shredded is still Pakistan. India is at similar levels or slightly lower. Prices will probably, in my view, could be softening down a bit of $5 here and there is what I feel. Yeah.
I see. Right. So we are running short of time. So I'll quickly jump on to the next question, which is on container shortage. So there was a severe shortage late February onwards, as we have all been speaking about. So can you elaborate on how much impact it had on the scrap prices? And looking ahead, how is this container shortage scenario looking in the months ahead? So with you, Mrs. Singh, could you just elaborate, give us a forecast on container availability? And don't they also want to come back to business? Like you said, the scrap pickers need to get back to business. So why are the container people staying away from the market at this point?
So what happened is, as we saw in the last couple of months. I mean, March was a full month in terms of demand, and however, the container availability had starting to lessen because China was in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. And this was post post their late January Chinese New Year, and then going into February. And during this time, the container availability or repositioning, so to say, from China, because these Chinese containers go all the way to US, Europe with their products, and then there are empties available for them to ship the scrap back. Those had started to tighten because, and more than that, more than tighten, the availability virtually vanished because the Chinese shut down all ports and all. There were vessels upon vessels standing outside the ports and were not being emptied. And as China shut down all its cities and went down extended lockdowns and so on, so you had the containers stuck there. Okay? And this was on top of the Chinese New Year time, when typically the country goes on a 2-week kind of a holiday, 10-day, 2-week kind of a holiday, when the entire country shuts down and there's no shipments which happen at that time from China to the West. On top
Are they coming back to the market?
Pardon me?
Are they coming back to business? Is the container availability going to look better in the months ahead?
Yeah, so it has started to look better already. So the prices spiked to twice as much, in those times, and then as we went into April, then demand sort of got destroyed, and therefore the freights came down as well to the earlier levels and maybe lower than that. But then these shipping lines have kind of they dry docked a lot of their ships because with containers in them, these MSCs and the Maersks of this world, they try to sort of artificially restrict the supply, and therefore you've seen prices. You've seen the freights go down, correct significantly to earlier levels and go up a little bit. But now with demand starting to pick up a little bit, there are indications that these shipping lines will bring in those vessels with their dry dock, and there could be a little more supply available. So in the short term, and this availability of containers has improved, and in the short term, you may see some sort of a correction or reduction in the freight levels for containers as the shipping lines bring in back some of those vessels with containers dry dock.
All right. Okay. So we'll do a very quick last question from my section because time is running out really. So Mr. Vaidyanathan, could you tell us about some of the big bulk orders that are currently underway or expected to be underway?
Currently underway is quite, I'm sure, known to everybody here. The future, I think, as I was telling, most of the bulk goes to either Bangladesh is one big market for bulk. Is getting the bulk, though in a big way. India very recently they have done a cargo, but it is not a great bulk, bulk market. India is more of a containerized market, and Turkey is yet another market on bulk. So I see the incoming as is going to go silent in the next 10-15 days. Then probably offers Bangladesh, even to Pakistan, would be coming up in the days to come. And that being the case, that will have a pressure on the prices, is what I told you earlier. And bulk, only like I foresee that only Bangladesh is one attractive market in terms of. See, if you look at even US, the freight rate to Turkey is quite cheaper. They're talking about $12 a ton of freight rate from US to Turkey. Whereas when it compares to Bangladesh or to Pakistan, the freight rate is quite high. So even USA would ideally would like to do it for Turkey, but Turkey being not there, then probably from East Coast or from West Coast, they would prefer to either Bangladesh or to Pakistan.
Okay, so we'll jump on to the next section, which is with you, Akshay, for logistics. We are running short of time, so maybe you might like to limit the questions to 1 or 2.
Yes, sure. So regarding the logistics, I would like to know from Mr. Bhartindu from GSL, as well as Bangladesh's opinion from Mr. Amir Ali Hussain. Starting with Mr. Bhartindu, in the month of May, we saw that even after the lockdown restrictions were eased a little bit, but and the plants were allowed to resume in the middle of month. They were given permission by the government, but there was a lot of scrap consignments, that the previously booked scrap consignments, that were stuck at the ports. Now, there were various reasons for that, one of which was the labor shortage, because during the same time, the labor had been transported to their native states via special trains that had been run. So, because of the labor shortage and other reasons, the scrap could not be transported back to plants, thus and stuck.
Mr. Akshay, the situation was, not good till middle of May, because by that time, Indian government was not very clear when the lockdown will be open, and steamers were not very sure when they are going to start operating. So there were two back-to-back concerns, and when around 14th of May, when the decision was taken by the Indian government, yes, we are going to open up, and steel mills decided to start their mills at 30 to 40% capacity. So, and the government also supported that with whatever containers were lying at the respective ports, the detention-free period was extended till 3rd of May. And thereafter, shipping lines also supported to some extent that there was not much of detention incurred on the stranded containers for most of the steel mills. That was something really good from the Indian government point of view, and the shipping lines. And thereafter, yes, there was a slight shortage of the road movement because the trucks were not available. So then again, the Indian Railways supported in giving the containers. The private rake owners also deployed their rakes to move the containers from Vizag port, from Chennai, and from Mundra and Nhava Sheva to respective destinations. So Indian Railways definitely helped us in moving the containers, not to Jindal, but most of the steel mills took the help of the Indian Railways. But yes, one thing really good happened, that yes, government supported us in reducing the detention. Otherwise, it would have gone like something which people would have decided to leave the cargoes at the port rather than taking the shipments, because the demurrage and detention was extremely high. And now, by this time, 90% evacuation has taken place. Now, nothing is left at the respective ports, and everything is now normal. And we are just presuming that steel mills, carbon steel and stainless steel, they are back on business. Yes, stainless steel will take some more time, because the customers of stainless steel are slightly not very, they are slightly defensive. They are not coming forward because they are also looking to back customers, because the finances and the fund flow is not that good. And for carbon steel, yes, the good exports are taking flow from India, and but still at around 40 to 50% only capacity, most of the steel mills are operating. So I understand that till August or September, situation will remain mild only. Yes.
All right, thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Amir Ali Hussain, we'd like to have your insight on the same. So, to Bangladesh industry, how did the shipments of the previously booked scrap and the collection by the steel mills, were they hampered in collecting the imported scrap consignments from the ports? So, how did you face these situations?
Look, initially there were some logistics issues, but in Bangladesh, as I said, it was not really a lockdown. It was a public holiday declared, basically, to turn off offices and schools and all that. But the port was operating. The challenge at the port was, the companies were not able to take deliveries because there was also a lot of space issues at various plants and all the industries. If you cannot ship out anything, where will you keep the raw material? So a lot of containers were stuck at the port, and the port was heavily congested with the containers. So the government here decided to waive off all the detention charges, for the containers, and asked everybody to clear. So as the trucks also started to fly more, the containers started to get cleared. In terms of bulk, we've handled our bulk vessels with the support of our logistics and our partners in logistics. So we were able to clear the bulk consignments in time, which is not the issue. Currently and before in April and May, the scrap in terms of availability of scrap to the industries, whoever was operating at a lower level was not actually the main issue. The main challenge was, which I'm sure many companies in India and maybe in Pakistan would also have may have faced, was other consumables stock. Right. So it's sponge iron or DRI and ferroalloys, then refractories, so things like that. So Bangladesh mostly imports all these things from India, and the Indian lockdown actually really affected the Bangladesh industry very hard. So there were times during the last 2 months, some companies had to close because not because of scrap, but because either they did not have DRI or they did not have ferroalloys, or somebody went short of refractory. So because generally these things, because India is close by, so nobody stocks extra. We stock scrap extra because of the long lead time, but nobody stocks these kind of products extra. So so while they were not available, so some companies had to close down. Even today, the border trade of India has still not opened, and I think the Indian Exporters Association and the companies who are interested in the export, they are lobbying with the government to open. I think the challenge is about with the COVID, if the truck drivers cross into the no man's land, when they have to do quarantine when they go back. So there is a lot of congestion at the border. So because of that, the supply chain has shifted a little bit. Whoever can, and it's possible they have brought cargoes from the sea because the Indian ports have been open. The challenge in April was, if you had given orders for sponge iron or ferroalloys to India, the challenge was to transport the material from the factories of India to the Indian ports, and also they had to cross the various states. So one state has one rule, especially West Bengal, they were more strict. Some other state had different rules. So we had to take special permissions from the state governments in India to be able to transport our material, from the factory to the ports. And the government was, in a way, encouraging export. Challenge was the availability of the vehicles and the drivers, and the logistics challenge of, in India, if you, at that time, if you were crossing a state, then all those quarantine rules were coming in and all that. So eventually that got sorted out as time went by. So these are the challenges of this environment, not only from your international trade perspective, but also local perspective. If we are delivering to customer here anywhere, and suddenly that area goes into a lockdown because it becomes a red zone somehow, and then what do you do with that vehicle there in that area? So even the driver is reluctant to go there. So every day has been a challenge in these times, and of course it keeps you very much awake and alive. And while you were generally stuck at home, you needed these type of tensions also to keep your mind active. So we have passed the tougher stage, but now we have to pass the stage of creating demand and being able to supply and sourcing normally and all that.
All right. So now we will be moving on to the audience questions.
Right. And can I put in the first question? Mr. Ali Hussain, the first question is targeted at you, and it is coming from Mr. Ali Mahbub Hussain, and he is asking how the Bangladeshi mills will overcome the negative impact of this year's balance sheet, looking at the way the industry has been and how the sales have been. So he's really hinting at perhaps debt management and how will you manage, your profit and loss for this year, and if there are any debts. So could you please answer that? And debt, I might like to add, is a common theme across Indian companies also. So what is your reply to this question, please?
See, the environment currently is such that there is no point of even forecasting or thinking about your profit and loss, because going forward the challenge is to survive. So the as an industry, so for the whole industry to survive and pass this stage is what is critical. Of course, there is there will be industry nature is such, there is high debt in the industry, and I know that even in India and here in also in Bangladesh, the government has given a lot of the flexibility and packages to the business community to be able to sustain this for some time. Of course, no package will ever be enough. In India, I think in the even in the Indian history, the government has given such a high package. Even in Bangladesh, the government has given over $1 billion package, which is huge for the the country. And about and as time has gone by, the packages have kept on being announced. For example, in April and May, the interest was not charged to any companies in Bangladesh, and all the interest was kept in the block account in the banks, which the government is going to subsidize, partly, and the government is going to give low interest rate loans. So all those things will help us. But going forward, it's not about what the balance sheet will look like, because it will look like the way it will look like based on the current circumstances, without anybody's fault. So we just have to pass this time.
And if I might just quickly add, Mr. Javed, there's a similar question for you. Uh, Gentleman asking, have you highlighted the crisis to the government from PSMA? And then what kind of a help do you think can come for the industry to cope with it?
Yes, we have already highlighted to Pakistan Steel Welfare Association to the government to waive off the duty or taxes, or if they cannot waive it, at least we can reduce the duty and taxes. And also to follow the footsteps of Bangladesh and India, how they pressurize the shipping lines to waive off the detention, which is a big hit. But unfortunately, this is really unfortunate for us that nothing has been taken positive yet. So we are still in the verge at the moment to take these hits, and we have already made our mind that might be in future that we have to put these, like losses into our balance sheets.
So how do you see the stainless steel demand and in the as you mentioned earlier that the stainless steel demand will take slightly more time to pick up as compared to the mild carbon steel. So can we expect that by the end of this year, maybe the trades will go back to almost normal levels?
Okay, good question. See, in stainless steel, there are three or four type of grades, steel which are required by different type of the customers. Okay, so at the moment, yes, the 300 series where more of nickel is required in the making. A good demand is there because for 300 series quality of steel, there is demand and slowly picking up also. But the bad part is for 200, where the local requirement for hollowware, for utensils, and for infrastructure, and for 400 series, where it goes more into the automobile, is severely, very badly impacted. And both 200 and 400 series takes care around 40 to 50% of the total steel production. So, because now for next 3 months, say till August, the steel industry will be morely harping more on 300 series production, and but 200 and 400 series, where more of shredded scrap, ferrous scrap is used, is badly affected. And this is the reason why in India the ferrous scrap may not be much required for another 2-3 months. And but whatever requirement is there, yes, most of the steel mills do have their own stocks, inventories, and as a stopgap, the domestic market can meet the requirement. Yes.
All right. So we have another question from Mr. Abhijit Mahanta from EMR. So he is asking that the Japan was relatively unaffected from the COVID-19 pandemic as compared to North America and Europe. So is the Japanese scrap availability better as compared to the European and North American counterparts? Maybe Mr. Arshdeep Singh, if you'd like to take that.
Sure, thanks. Actually, whilst Japan was not under lockdown, even the national emergency which they declared was not really a lockdown kind of scenario. It was left to the industry, left to individuals to decide the extent of the quote unquote lockdown that they wanted to have upon themselves. So yeah, the scrap availability has been a little better. However, at the same time, the steel mills have been running at fairly strong capacity utilization levels, 70 to 80% now. But even earlier, they were like between 55 to 60% capacity utilization already the last couple of months. So whilst the automobile segment was really affected, you had the auto manufacturing plant shut down. There's definitely a shortage for bushlings, but the there was a shortage. There was tightness in the supply, but it was still better than, let's say, the US, relatively speaking. Though the size of the US market, of course, is much bigger than the Japanese market. But however, the requirements from the mills has also been sort of stronger. So there again, the supply available for scrap for exports is still very tight, and especially now because the steel mills in Japan the last week or so have started raising prices from the earlier levels, maybe more than a week, 2 weeks. Then they've been doing it like one day after another, and there's and it's you also had one more thing to keep in mind, that Japan supplies to nearby areas like Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam. Okay, and the effect of the coronavirus in these markets has been relatively limited. They've been able to control the virus issues in these markets. So business has been relatively less affected in these markets, and Japan, you had continuous demand come out from those markets as well. And now on top of that, you have the domestic mills sort of upping the ante, so to say. So the situation at this point in time is very, very tight. You have prices going up. The expectation of supply is very, very strong, and it's I would say probably. So answering your question, it's the supply is the supply is still very tight from Japan.
Right. I have the next question here from Mr. Hardik of Electrothon. And this question is for you, Mr. Vaidyanathan. So he's pointing out that Africa is also importing sizable scrap from UAE. So how is the trend here? What do you see for African scrap imports?
Yeah, predominantly the African scrap comes from the southern part of the Africa. South Africa is one of the major source of scrap, which we all know it. And secondly, the West African scrap. So the West African scrap is considered slightly in terms of quality, it is considered inferior. Also, the weight in containers are relatively around 20, 21, 22 tons is what normally on an average it comes to. So the South African scrap, mostly it goes to either India or to Pakistan. Mostly to India, Pakistan it goes to. And I would say these days, the last 2-3 months, if you see, most of the South Africa scrap goes to Pakistan and India on a spread. Now, West African scrap only, I mean, to my knowledge, it only comes to India and predominantly to places like Goa. That is the market which brings up consumes the West African scrap, and Chennai is one market in India where the West African scrap comes up. So the generation in West Africa is of not of much, because you see South Africa was under lockdown because South Africa had plenty of cases, and South Africa is still not free from COVID, and the impact is pretty huge in South Africa. Though the lockdown is being eased out, but collection is difficult in South Africa. So in the future, in the coming months at least, I see there will be a tightness of scrap supply from South Africa. and West Africa will continue to contribute. It's a low volume market. It's a very negligible market, West Africa. So it will continue to come to wherever it is coming to now. As I told you, probably to Goa or to Chennai or to any markets.
All right.
All right, the next, the next question is from Mr. M.J. Dhar. He's from Mesco Steel, and this question is for you, Mr. Singh. He's saying Indian steel mills demand will increase. Well, the capacity utilizations are increasing, as we all know. So if the yard collection increase their scrap supply, then will there be some healthy demand supply situation going ahead? So one of us just forecasted that demand will actually be chasing supply. So his question is really on the balance. Do you see the balance coming back between demand and supply?
Right. I mean, it obviously will need to do with how the origination of scrap, the countries which originate scrap, the overall industrial activity starting to go back to normalcy there, and scrap is a generated product, and it all depend upon industrial activity. It'll depend upon demolition projects going back on stream, depend upon car manufacturing starting to go back to normalcy. So whilst the demand will I mean, if the demand sort of comes back on quickly enough, would the supply be quick enough as well? We need to see. I mean, it's a very great question, but a little difficult to answer because it'll depend upon the how the industrial activity starts to pick up and perk up in some of these origination markets for scrap.
Right. Okay. So we have just about maybe 5 to 8 minutes left. And I'd like to ask the participants to kindly fill in the feedback form, which might be flashing on your screen. So it will really help us to improve this webinar. So the next question, Akshay, and we have just about maybe 5 minutes to 8 minutes left.
Sure. So the next question is from Khatib and Sons in Pakistan. It is for Mr. Javed regarding the outlook on domestic steel prices. So, and also, do you see the deformed bar prices in the Pakistani market going up in the coming months?
The prices are pushing up because there's a lack of supply at the moment in Pakistan, and I think there is not much even the inventory from the local market as well, because Pakistan has almost about 1 million tons in the local scrap industry. So this hasn't been collected as well because of the 3 months COVID and lockdown. So this prices have already gone up for the scrap. So definitely the prices of deformed bar will also raise up. Market availability will be there, but there will be a deficit, and because of the lockdown and the COVID, and margins are squeezed. But you have to run the plant, but you don't have an option, like just to shut down the plant because of your squeezed margins.
All right, sir. And we have another question from Mr. Bindu. We have a question that the car manufacturing companies, and they have also been quite badly impacted from the pandemic, and the stainless steel they are one of the larger consumers of stainless steel. So considering that into the fact, how do you see your imported shredded scrap rates from your perspective, from your company's perspective? Like as a percentage of your total scrap consumption, do you see share of imported scrap going up or going down? Yeah. So one of our audience participants mentioned that the car manufacturing companies are also been facing a slowdown, and so with regards to that, your scrap consumption at JSL. So out of the total scrap consumption, do you see the imported shredded scrap consumption the share of imported going up or down out of your total scrap?
Okay. For automobile industry, the busheling scrap is required, which is slightly, which is very clean and having a slightly better force. And this goes for the automobile grades where 400 series steel is produced. Yes, because for last 4-5 months and next 4-5 months, the automobile industry will remain under recession or under hardly 30-40% of production will take place. So it's like vice versa, supply chain balancing. The automobile industry works, then the steel scrap comes out, and which is again supplied back to our industry who consume it to melt it and again produce steel for them. So there is a gap. So now the situation is the steel industry, the automobile industry is also not at the full strength. So the scrap generation is not much. And yes, definitely to meet their requirement, the imports should increase. But the question is how much imports would be required to meet the domestic requirement? Because the domestic requirement also subdued drastically. And we think for next 4 months, because the entire cycle of ferrous scrap or busheling scrap or stainless steel scrap is for next 4 months. We can foresee till September how the demand will take the shape. Beyond that, we have to presume that situation should improve and the automobile industry and the local hollowware industry, infrastructure industry where the stainless steel is consumed should be back and the demand should come back. But yes, if there is any immediate requirement, the imports should come. Imports will be booked. But I don't think that there are orders because since we are the largest manufacturer of stainless steel, we are so badly impacted in this 200 and 400 series that there is no demand in automobile, in infrastructure, hollowware, or wherever the stainless steel is consumed. Only in 300 series, which is a niche product, and it is getting exported, or wherever high-end utilization of steel is there, stainless steel is there. So I think it is balanced. I don't think that till August or September, there will be imbalance in the demand and supply. So till August and September, we have to keep our fingers crossed. Yes, we have to take position. We have to take position for September. So we have to start booking from imports from, as I mentioned earlier, on last week of June or beginning of July, but very selectively, because we have to take a chance. Because we cannot go in a full swing, but that from September onwards, the demand will be there. If it doesn't happen, then again, what we have faced in March, April, and May, we may again land up in again in September and October. So it's a calculative risk, and we are going to take decisions very selectively. Thank you.
So can I move on to the very last question? So this question is coming from Ritesh Maheshwari, who's from Shahbro Metallic in New Delhi. And his question is for Mr. Amir Ali. Sir, could you elaborate on end user market requirement of steel grades in Bangladesh? And do you see the requirements getting more stringent, prompting steel manufacturers to move towards cleaner grades of scrap?
So in terms of Bangladesh market, Bangladesh market is basically follows, there's a Bangladesh standard for steel. So the steel made in Bangladesh is as per Bangladesh standard, which is a copy of the ISO standard. So whatever steel made as per the standards, that is what is sold in Bangladesh, and it will continue. There is no requirement of further improvement on this, because whatever the standard dictates, and you produce something better than the standard, it is good enough, and that is what has been continuing. We've been doing in the past, and we will continue to do. And in terms of the requirement of scrap to be more clean, no, because as you produce as per standard, you require the scrap that you had been buying. So the country is going to buy the same type of scrap what we had been buying before. So there would not be any change to that.
Right. Okay. So with that,
one thing I would like to add, and it's very important for all of us to understand, like my panelists and my participants, because now Indian government is becoming more and more strict in viewing the ferrous scrap which is coming into India, which should be radiation free. Because the cleaner, the word, inverted comma, the cleaner means it should be radiation free. Okay, because now it is a serious threat for the steel industry, where the scrap which is coming is having radiation source, and which is impacting the quality and the life of the general public. So and it's very important, which we all have to understand now.
Right. So let's
This is a
end our
very important
webinar.
point Mr. Badru made. Even in Bangladesh, at the ports, now there are radiation detectors. So, in terms of the suppliers that we choose, are very important because, the suppliers have to ensure and guarantee the scrap is radiation free. Because once you import the scrap and this radiation, the supplier is not, it's a whole import process in terms of, refunds and claims and handling all the local issues with the government. It becomes very, very complicated. So from suppliers, you have to be very, very alert on this and make sure that all the scrap is radiation free. And also, what has been promised should be delivered, because sometimes what happens, there is some, when the supplier does not have control on the source as such, so you buy HMS and you end up with some sand or some stone. So not only is the problem that the importer loses money, okay, the supplier will return that money or give that compensation, but the headache for the buyer, it's becoming more and more, because the customs here would think that you are involved in money laundering, or you are playing something with the government, which genuinely which not be true, but still this is what happens. So from the supplier's perspective, this is the stringency that will keep coming more and more in future.
Right. On
Yeah.
that note, I'd like to end the webinar here. And broadly, the three trends that I got is that we are looking at August to October really for some kind of a recovery and some kind of, the markets coming back to normal. Also, the price forecast that I was getting was rather mixed. Some are seeing it $10 down, some are seeing it high. So this is how it's going to be. And also, there's a general sense that businesses have the desire to come back to the normal route of functioning. So that could be a good sign. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so very much for your precious time that you gave to us today and all of the insights that you have given. Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank all of the participants who have been with us, and you've flooded us with your questions. And I'm so sorry all of those questions could not be taken. And I'm sure to some extent we have broadly touched upon the big issues. So with that, we come to an end. And if you have friends who want to also see what was discussed during this webinar, we will be putting out an edited version of this webinar on YouTube. So you might like to look out for that. And also for the future, do look out for more webinars and podcasts from Steelmate events. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.